We're privileged now to be joined by Dolphin great Larry Csonka, who shared a special bond with Don Shula for so many years. And Larry, I recall speaking to you a few years ago at a Super Bowl, and you told me that you guys connected because you're both of Hungarian descent. And I remember you telling me a story of him meeting your dad, and he had a nickname for you. You had a nickname for him. Refresh my memory on that.
Well, I don't know if we want to bring up those Hungarian nicknames at this point, but my father, like Don Shula, was first generation American with Hungarian parents, and he and Coach Shula had a lot in common growing up. They both learned to speak Hungarian at home, and then had trouble speaking English early in grammar school, and went through the same kind of problems early childhood, and had a lot in common, and were both driven men, and understood each other. They got together probably the third or fourth game I played for Coach Shula with the Dolphins when he came to us in 1970. I think they met up in Buffalo. Dad came to one of the games. We both, Don Shula and I, grew up in the same area of Ohio, 20 years apart, but similar backgrounds, and Coach Shula and my dad kind of hit it off and stood and spoke Hungarian for about 35 minutes to each other, talking about all kinds of things, and seemed like they enjoyed each other's company.
I'm sure they did. So what made this son of a Hungarian fisherman become maybe the greatest NFL coach we've ever seen?
Coach Shula, attention to detail, his dedication, his profound belief in winning, but not winning at all cost. He said, we only win if we win within the parameter of the rules. So in other words, if we play by the rules and win, it's a victory. If we don't, then we're not going to consider it a victory, even if it is a victory. And that's an easy thing to say. Sometimes that's a tough thing to live by, but he's the kind of guy that would live by it. In other words, he would not tolerate any kind of cheating on any plane. So we just went into it. If we couldn't beat him square up with the rules, then we shouldn't beat him, is the way he felt about it. And he said that many times, and I saw a couple instances where he, in fact, proved it. So that's the difference, I think.
Larry, this is maybe the understatement of this interview, but he was not always an easy guy to play for, was he?
Hell no. I'll be the first to tell you, he was one of the most difficult guys in the world to play for. But I can't paint a picture that's just one-sided in this thing. People have diverse personalities. Coach Shula is one of those. He was dedicated to winning, and he was prepared to sacrifice and do everything he had to do in order to have the win come up. But he expected the same of you. So he didn't ask us to sacrifice more than he sacrificed himself. Now, the other side of that was his tremendous tenacity at practice, his attention to detail, the wrath that he would get after you at practice if you weren't paying close attention to exactly what was going on. He filmed practices, went over them play by play next day in the meeting, and had disciplinary actions. If you were caught not paying attention to what was going on the film, you paid the price the next day in laps or gassers or whatever. But all of that was what he was willing to do, and he didn't ask us to do anything that he wasn't willing to do, so it was hard to argue with him. Now, all of us thought he was crazy, and thought this isn't going to work. Football's a finical, things happen. It's a fast game. One or two things happen awry and can take the game from you. He believed with attention to detail that you can control those things. And it was rough getting used to that kind of philosophy. But 2 seasons into his new coaching ship at Miami, we were in the Super Bowl. We played against Dallas, and we got our ass kicked. They did a beautiful job of showing us that we shouldn't have been in the Super Bowl with them. But after the game, and here's a really important factor to answer your question, what makes him the pinnacle coach. After that loss, now this man as a head coach has lost Super Bowl III, and now he's lost Super Bowl VI. He got us all together through all the media, all the public people, everybody. Only the players and the coaches were in the locker room. And he got us all together and he said, now I want you to remember how you feel in this moment, because we're going to use this moment to launch us into next year. And our objective is to never feel this way again. So what we have to do is take from this loss and get some direction about paying total attention to the game at hand each week, to take them one at a time and concentrate, go with the idea of winning every game. Now, that's the first time we had heard about that. We did it. He did it. We did it because he demanded it. And we went through that next season, that next preseason. And lo and behold, it turned out to be the only time in 100 years a team went undefeated. Not to say that it was this player or that player. It was all of us. Any one player, special teams, third-team players stepped up and made the play because they were all rehearsed. They had all paid their dues.
Yeah.
That's the kind of intense coach he was. And that's not an easy guy to play for when you're out in 90-degree heat practicing twice a day in preseason. It'd be easy to let your lip get you in trouble and end up traded to Buffalo or Wisconsin or some other gosh-awful place.
You know what strikes me, Larry, and what struck me the minute I got to South Florida was the camaraderie that you guys had amongst each other, this Dolphin fraternity. And I recall you telling me that about Don Shula, that you said, I absolutely love the man. And it's obvious that all of his former players felt the same way. Why?
Because of his intensity, because he didn't demand that you do, as a player, do this, and he as a coach would do this. We did it together. When he threw himself into it, he would actually even run gassers after practice, after being out there in 90-degree heat. He said, we're going to use this heat in South Florida as an asset, not as a liability. In the fourth quarter, we're going to be able to go when the other team that comes down to play us in this 90-degree heat can't, then we'll still go. And it worked. That worked. So his willingness to get in there with us and be amongst us and be one of us was obvious. Now, when you have a coach that's that dedicated to winning and that's smart about it, it's hard not to follow him. Now, I wouldn't insult your intelligence and tell you for a minute, you've got some sports history, your background. You know how easy it is to hate a head coach. It can happen.
Yeah.
And it's an easy thing that it can happen too. You just want to get out of Dodge and forget it. Let's go someplace where it's not so tough. But he was using every seemingly negative thing, like practicing in 90-degree heat. He was going to turn that tremendous liability into an asset. And I saw it happen. I saw what he talked about transfer into reality and become winning. That's when I started to believe in him and believe in his high ethics and the fact that he was what he said he was. If we couldn't beat him fair and square, then we shouldn't beat him. That's the way he was at it. But he said, we will leave no stone unturned in finding a way to beat them within the rules. Now, if you were ready to go along with that, you stayed. If you didn't, then you got on the next stagecoach out of Dodge.
I can't let you leave, Larry, without telling the story about the alligator in the shower. And was that you, by the way? I've heard different stories about whose bright idea it was. So now, Larry, is the time to fess up.
I was part of the caper, but I was perhaps not the brains of the caper. Certainly not. I was a fullback, so I'd plead my case. But I was out fishing with him on a day after a game, an exhibition game, and Shula had been very intense in our preseason, and he was driving us all crazy. And Manny Fernandez and I were out fishing for a few hours on our one day off during the preseason, and there was an alligator up on the beach, and there were some baby alligators running around it, 2 or 3 feet long, whatever. And Manny Fernandez told me calmly, I can catch one of those. I said, Manny, that's crazy. You can't do that. He jumped out of the boat, caught the alligator, put it in the boat. I jumped out of the boat. We brought the alligator back, and we're going to put it in the pond at Biscayne College where we practiced, where we were staying for our training camp. And instead of doing that, I did come up with the idea of putting it in Shula's shower just as a joke. Now, Shula has a great sense of humor. Don't get me wrong, when I talk about how tough he was and how dedicated he was. But he also had a sense of humor. And thank God. And so we talked amongst ourselves and decided, we took a count, flipped a coin or whatever we did, and decided to tape the gator's mouth shut just in case Shula stepped into his private shower there. And things could have been real bad. But by one vote, it was decided that we would tape the Gators' mouth shut. So when he walked in and seen that in the shower and ran out, of course, he came in the locker room and was ready to. It was funny as he ran over to my locker, but I saw him coming, so I got out of there and he ended up hopping Jim Kick. Kick always got the front of the thing. But that was the Gator. I think that's the only time that he was ever found an alligator in the shower. One time at practice, I saw him jump when there was a little critter on the field, and I remembered that, and I thought an alligator would really send him on a rampart, so we did that. He was the kind of guy that had a good sense of humor. Even in the worst situations, you'd see him crack a smile. And I never realized how close I had gotten to him and how strong and fortified a person he was. I just expected him to live to be 100. And suddenly to lose him just with a phone call this morning was a real shock. You always think back, I thought I had another 10 years with him, I was hoping. And it was just suddenly the curtain dropped, and it's just a very sad thing.
Before I let you go, Larry, we, of course, here think of Don Shula as the first face on South Florida's Mount Rushmore of sports. How would you sum up his legacy?
I think Don personified what coaching in the NFL should be about. Maybe perhaps coaching in all of football should be about. His high ethics, and I am jealous of his pride and his ethics that he applied to the game. Don was the kind of guy that didn't like a rule. He didn't try to avoid the rule or go around the rule. He went back and tried to change the rule with the rules committee, which speaks volumes about him, But he often said, we will win within the confines of the rules or we won't. But I will not. And there's instances I can spot you where he actually, put that on the line. He would not take an easy way out. He wanted to do it within the confines of the rules, and it wasn't a victory unless we did it that way. And that's what sports, particularly team sports, are all about. And if you think there's a lesson to be learned, something for the ages that will last, I think it's that what personifies his coaching ability, certainly the undefeated season, but his high ethics and high standards lend just as much credibility as the undefeated season.
Doing it the right way. Larry Csonka, always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel for you. I know this is a difficult day, and for that reason, I certainly thank you deeply for spending time with us to share your fond memories of Don Shula. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you.